Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Donald Trump says the US will run Venezuela until a safe transition can take place, following a large-scale military operation overnight in which the country's president and his wife were taken captive. Nicolas Maduro is being transported by ship to New York, where he faces charges of narco-terrorism. The Venezuelan government called the operation an imperialist attack and urged people to take to the streets. Well, strikes were heard in the capital, Caracas, as well as in the states of Miranda, Aragua and La Guaira. Sky News is verifying the locations of some of those airstrikes, seen here on the map. Well, Donald Trump posted this image to his Truth Social of Nicolas Maduro on board the USS Iwo Jima, moments before making his address from Mar-a-Lago. Here's some of what the president had to say.
At my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. These highly trained warriors, operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement, caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in a ready, what's called a ready position, but they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. There's no equipment like what we have. And you see that even if you just look at the boats. You know, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average, 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
Well, we also heard from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, on the details of the operation.
This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do. It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. And the word integration does not explain the sheer complexity of such a mission. An extraction so precise, it involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination, all coming together in time and place to layer effects for a single purpose: to get an interdiction force into downtown Caracas while maintaining the element of tactical surprise. After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets, in early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel so, as the president said, they could be brought to justice. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. We arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life.
Well, let's bring in journalist Rosalia Hernandez, who is in Caracas for us. Very good to talk to you this evening. What is actually going on the streets there? What is the feeling in the city?
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Well, right now in the streets of Caracas, we are living a very confusion situation. Everybody's trying to buy some gasoline, trying to buy some food. You can see a lot of people trying to see what is happening because almost the half of Caracas has been under electrical shutdown as well as communication shut down. So it's quite difficult for Venezuelans right now to know what is happening and to understand what is happening right now with this situation with the United States right now.
President Trump says that Delcy Rodriguez is the new president. Is there any evidence of that for the people of Venezuela that is the case?
No, we haven't seen any evidence about that. He hasn't shown any pictures of her in the assembly. I assume it's going to take place in the National Assembly. He hasn't sworn yet publicly, so I don't know what he's trying to communicate Trump right now about that statement. So we are waiting to see what Delcy Rodriguez says about that. Early, a few hours ago, some sources from different outlets, such as Reuters and the New York Times, confirmed that Delcy Rodriguez left the country. She was apparently in Russia. But the information that Donald Trump says in the conference contradicts that information. So we are waiting for official statement. I don't know if from Delcy Rodriguez or Donald Trump to show what is happening right now with Delcy Rodriguez and if she's here in the country.
You said that there is confusion, people obviously trying out to go and get provisions, get gas. Are people scared?
Yeah, people are really scared right now. In Venezuela, we have a very complex situation because we don't have access to our free communications. and to official sources where we can see what is really happening. During all December, we living in like a bubble, like a communicational bubble. The regime of Nicolas Maduro show some normality in all the things that were happening in the Caribbean. So most of the people in Venezuela and also in Caracas wasn't really well informed what was happening. But with these strikes, I think that the truth is impossible to ignore right now. So right now, the Venezuelans are getting into a path they didn't think they were going to walk through this new year. So they are very scared. They have a lot of questions of what is going to happen next because Nicolas Maduro left the country, but in here we remain one of the very important personalities.
Oh, we're just losing you there. We're just going to step away from Rosalía Hernandez there, talking to us live in Caracas, to show you these images that we are getting. Now, this is apparently from state television in Caracas, and this is Delicia Rodriguez. It's not live, as you can see. It's an internet feed, but it is the latest images, according to the Reuters news agency, of Delicia Rodriguez, shown alongside her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, who is the Foreign and Defence Minister also. It was interesting, Rosalie just saying that there hasn't been any images shown of her. Well, this does appear to be a new image. We've seen this one before. This is a library footage, but those images that we brought you very briefly of Delicia Rodriguez, described in the past by people as a hardcore Chavista, somebody who was a real fan of Maduro, served under him. She was briefly at the Venezuelan embassy in London and called what happened this morning a brutal assault on Venezuela. Since then, though, it appears that there has been conversations between her and President Trump's teams and Marco Rubio, and she has, according to President Trump, been sworn in as president. We are just getting some words coming to us from what she's saying. She is apparently, during this address, calling for the release of Maduro and his wife. So this is the latest footage that we have of Delicia Rodriguez, who was the vice president. President Trump says she is now the president, reiterating that she calls for the release of President Maduro and his wife. She's speaking on state television in Caracas, according to Reuters, alongside her brother Jorge Rodriguez, who we can't see in this image. Interesting if she is calling for Maduro's release, given that President Trump said only an hour or so ago that Marco Rubio has had a conversation with her. She is prepared to do what we want to make Venezuela great again. And presumably President Trump is not expecting her to be calling for President Maduro's release. But that is what we are getting from Venezuela's vice president. Still no confirmation that she has been confirmed as president. Let's see if we can return to Rosalía Hernandez, journalist in Caracas. Rosalie, I don't know if you're able to hear that Delicia Rodriguez is talking there, calling for Maduro to be released, which seems to suggest that she's perhaps not quite as biddable to President Trump's will as he might hope.
During this conversation, I can see that Delicia Rodriguez has been talking. I don't know what is she saying right now, but early this morning she asked for a proof of life of Nicolas Maduro, but we can analyze all the situation and can put all the pieces together, and it seems that this has been arranged. No, Donald Trump showed that he has been talking with a lot of people in the regime of Nicolas Maduro leaders. So maybe right now she's trying to show that they are not traitors and they don't know what is happening. I think that is just to send a local message to seem that we are strong, that we are united, but in the reality, maybe that's not the truth. We need to see what is happening next after she talks, and what are going to be the next statements from the White House and other leaders of Nicolas Maduro regimen. Well, right now we can call it Chavista regimen. I don't know, the official regimen.
Indeed. Just to let you know, Rosalie, some of the other things that she has been saying, she's called for calm, called for unity to defend the country, but also says that Venezuela will never be a colony of any nation. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the primary statement of the regimen communications. They always says that we are not a colony, that we are not going to be colonized, but we in here, all the Russians and Iranians and Chinese have all the control of our natural resources. So that's kind of ironic, but maybe she's trying to send a local message. No, but behind door, maybe they have made a negotiation to go through a real transition. Nicolas Maduro said 2 weeks ago that he has been talking to Donald Trump personally. The same was told by Donald Trump, that he has been in communication with Nicolas Maduro, and he didn't agree to go to any of the agreement that the White House was offering him. So maybe they got internal arrange, leaving aside to Maduro, and maybe go to a path that can be a little more easy to go through for Donald Trump. There is another thing that is very important, that he put aside the leadership of Maria Corina Machado. That's a very important situation, because that's the popular need. They voted for Edmundo González and for Maria Corina Machado to go to lead this path. So Donald Trump says no, she doesn't have nothing to do with this. She has no power in this, and that changes all the games that the Venezuelans were playing diplomatically speaking.
Just also to let you know, also sitting alongside her, the Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, is also in attendance. She has just said there is only one president of Venezuela, Maduro. Is this going to encourage people in Venezuela, or is it going to lead to confusion, do you think?
I don't think that can lead some sort of civil war, or I don't know, some arm support, because Venezuelans doesn't they want a pacific way out to this situation. Maybe internally there's going to be a little more repression that we are living right now. Maybe a lot of more voices are going to be silenced. A lot of more politicians will be not able to talk about what is happening. So maybe, like always happens, the repression internally is going to be quite important, because they need to control what is happening here in Venezuela. We have to remember that what makes Venezuela so powerful and so needed for Donald Trump is the access to the region, the access to the resources, the access to all those routes where the petroleum and the narcotics are going through. So I don't think there is not only a political issue, it's also a control issue by the party, by the right party of the Donald Trump. I think it's a very complex situation. I don't think that Delcy Rodriguez right now is telling totally true. We need to see what is really going to happen in the next day. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to release Nicolas Maduro. I think that they have been they have made a negotiation with Delcy Rodriguez.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem to be the message that was coming out of that press conference at Mar-a-Lago, does it? Rosalie Hernandez, journalist in Caracas, really good to talk to you and get a feeling for what is actually happening on the streets there. As Rosalie was talking to us, we did have an image which has been released by President Trump on his Truth Social. It shows what appears to be an improvised situation room, Trump alongside Marco Rubio there, in what appears to be an improvised situation room. We know that this happened last night, the attack on Venezuela, well, the removal of Maduro from Venezuela whilst Trump was at Mar-a-Lago. Some people questioning why he wasn't up in the White House at the Situation Room there, but of course he is down in Mar-a-Lago on his New Year break. So these latest images just from the Truth Social feed. Well, who is the Venezuelan leader captured by the US? Our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey has been looking at the life of Nicolas Maduro.
This was Nicolas Maduro and his wife just a few days ago, looking relaxed and smiling.
Un acuerdo de combate contra el narcotráfico, estamos listos.
He tells his interviewer he was open to closer cooperation with Donald Trump. He has now, it seems, been deposed and he's on his way to an uncertain fate.
Not war, just peace, forever, forever, forever.
Whatever the future brings, Nicolas Maduro may be remembered most for pictures like these. A leader who danced as Venezuela's economy sank deeper and American warships advanced on his country.
Not war, not war, not war. Just peace, just peace, just peace, forever, forever, forever. Peace forever.
His brazen swagger was with him till the end. Here a few months ago, claiming he was bigger than Taylor Swift.
Soy más famoso que Taylor Swift en Estados Unidos ahorita.
But Nicolas Maduro will go down in history as the man who took a nation with enormous oil wealth and potential and left it ruined. For much of his life, though, he was in the shadow of this man, revolutionary socialist firebrand Hugo Chavez, who upturned Venezuela with radical changes in the early 2000s, nationalizing its oil industry and reducing poverty. Before Chavez died, he made Maduro his successor. But Nicolas Maduro had none of his mentor's charisma or popularity. He was despised by many in Venezuela's elites as a poor substitute. To maintain power, he would rely more and more not on competence, but repression. In elections in 2015, Maduro lost his majority in parliament, but he refused to stand down. In 2016, Maduro's fortunes took a turn for the worse when the man who would become his nemesis was elected US president. Donald Trump imposed swingeing sanctions. The Venezuelan economy went from bad to catastrophic, and 7 million people would end up fleeing its collapse. In widespread protests in 2017, more than 100 people died. Opposition groups claim thousands were also killed by the secret police and in jails. But Nicolas Maduro appeared unmoved. Even after this attempt on his life, with exploding drones in 2018, which was blamed on rogue elements inside the country, behind the scenes opponents were plotting, hoping for his downfall. Led by this man, Juan Guaido, who declared Maduro illegitimate and himself acting president instead, he was recognized by the US and others. His fortunes turned again thanks to events halfway around the world, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. When the West stopped buying Russian oil, it turned to Venezuela and its vast reserves instead. Maduro was allowed back in, out of the cold. That may have emboldened him to pull off one of the biggest election frauds in Latin American history. In elections in 2024, the opposition is thought by most observers to have won a landslide. But Maduro again refused to give up power, declaring victory unconvincingly. Then in America, Donald Trump was re-elected and he branded Maduro a narco-terrorist. He then sent powerful elements of America's Navy to the Caribbean coast to threaten him. Trump's campaign against Maduro has been unrelenting with a massive naval buildup. At first, it was aimed at Venezuela's narco-trafficking operations. At least 30 small boats destroyed, allegedly for drug running, but with little evidence to prove the claims. Then oil tankers were seized, accused of breaking international sanctions. Just last month, it seemed like business as usual in Caracas, though it was in many ways a veneer of normality. Markets were open and people were going about their Christmas shopping. Most Venezuelans I spoke to said they didn't think the United States would ever do anything at all.
They will always try to lay their hands on Venezuela's riches, but they won't get away with it, because here we have strong people who are ready to put up a fight.
But beyond the buzzing shopping districts, the scars of Maduro's broken legacy were everywhere.
I used to make 90 bolivares a day. You could afford life. Cheap food, really cheap. There were plenty of jobs. You'd be happy, you'd have money. Now there is no life.
When he came into power, he promised to continue with the vision of a socialist state that would help everyone. But this is what it had come down to for some. A life on the streets, searching through rubbish for anything of value. Millions of Venezuelans wanted, or as they said, needed, something to change. The coming hours and days will be crucial for Venezuela, wherever they lead.
The hard part's going to be, how do you do transitional justice? How do you reinstitutionalize a country that has had its institutions beggared for 25 years? It's going to be difficult. How do you rebuild an economy that they have destroyed systematically, almost as if on purpose? This is a big moment for President Trump. It's an extraordinary action, a tactical action. The fact that they were able to capture Maduro without killing him is quite extraordinary. Now what happens? That's the question we all have.
Maduro's years of rampant kleptocracy leave the country racked with massive economic inequality, its resources robbed and its institutions dismantled. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has been clear that her party is ready to take the reins. Though Donald Trump has claimed Nicolas Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez has already been sworn in to replace him. She's reportedly said she's willing to do what's necessary to make Venezuela great again. That could include working with the United States to run her country. Whatever happens next, it will be an enormous challenge to get Venezuela back on the road to recovery. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News.
Well, Stuart, of course, pulled all that together before we saw those statements in the last few minutes by Delcy Rodriguez at Venezuela's National Assembly, where she has described what has happened overnight as political terrorism, has called the capture of President Maduro and his wife illegal, says there's only one Venezuelan leader, and he's called Nicolas Maduro, and is calling on the legality of this operation according to international laws, saying that we need to work to liberate our country, and America used brutal force. Well, let's bring in Jeffrey Korn, Director of the Center for Military Law at Texas Tech University and a former senior advisor to the US Army on warfare law. Really good to get your thoughts today, Jeffrey Korn. I asked one legal analyst in the last hour if any of this was within international law. She said, absolutely not. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I don't think there's a plausible legal basis for this military operation. I don't think it will affect what happens to Nicolas Maduro and his wife at this point, now that they're in U.S. custody. And I also think that the administration has been building the architecture for a legal argument with this boat strike, narco-terror theory of self-defense, which has been almost universally condemned as invalid by international law scholars. I've condemned it. At this point, I don't know if they even care about whether or not it's perceived as violating international law, or whether their argument that it's an act of self-defense against narco trafficking is legitimate. This seems to me to be a manifestation of a foreign policy that follows Napoleon's maxim: the tools belong to the man who can use them.
The fact that you say that President Trump doesn't really seem to care, I mean, the UN will get together. There will be strong words, won't they? They will give him, more than a verbal ticking off. But legally, nobody seems to be able to do anything to stop him.
Well, I think that's right. And this is one of the challenges of international law, but the consequences long-term could be very significant. The example the United States creates is oftentimes emulated and exaggerated by other leaders, other states, and we can imagine situations where a leader of a state has some problem, and the easy solution is to call it a military problem and just use force. The entire purpose of the United Nations was to prevent that type of unilateral resort to military force, except in situations of genuine necessity created by actual or imminent armed attacks against a state. This just seems to be insignificant for the United States. And I think the president's statement this morning was an indication that he's viewing this not just as a limited operation, but as signaling to the region and other leaders that if he decides something is a problem that looks like it can be dealt with militarily, the United States is not going to hesitate to do that.
Should other countries like Colombia and Cuba and Nicaragua be worried?
I mean, I think all countries should be worried about a country with the historic status of the United States. And, you know, for criticism we've had in the past about maybe pushing the limits of international law, we've never shredded the envelope like we're seeing now. But yes, I think smaller countries in the region that are perceived by the Trump administration as creating challenges to our foreign policy or our domestic agenda have legitimate reason to be concerned. Now, having said all that, I have no sympathy for Nicolas Maduro. I think he was a tyrant. There are going to be a lot of analogies to Panama. I was a soldier in Panama leading up to the invasion. I lived through the Noriega regime. I know what a country looks like when a dictator nullifies a legitimate democratic election. But the analogy is invalid. The invasion of Panama was not conducted to arrest General Noriega. That was a fringe benefit. It was conducted to protect Americans who were in jeopardy by the Panamanian defense forces that had been apparently unleashed by General Noriega. Nonetheless, I think that we can hold two truths at the same time. This action by the United States, in my view, violated international law and was not legitimate in that sense. But I don't have any sympathy for Nicolas Maduro, and I hope countries that criticize the United States also take the opportunity to encourage the Venezuelan military to support a restoration of democracy and let the will of the Venezuelan people lead their country out of this disaster.
A lot is being made of criticism of America going in and implementing regime change. But do you accept that there might be occasions when actually this might have worked historically?
Well, that's a little bit beyond my warrant. I'm a professor of international and criminal law. In my view, I mean, having just visited Panama, anybody who's been to Panama would be shocked to believe that there was a war there in 1989. That turned out well, I think, for the Panamanian people. But as a general proposition, unless you have substantial, almost universal support of the population for the regime change you're implementing, we know from bitter experiences in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other places that implementing that change can be terribly difficult. And this is why I hope the Venezuelan military leadership will get behind some type of interim or transitional government that will restore democracy to Venezuela.
It's worked in countries like Cambodia, though, in the past, hasn't it?
There have been examples where life has improved for people. I mean, generally, when leaders are accountable to the will of their people, human rights violations are reduced, conflict is reduced. I mean, this is empirically established. Conflict and human rights violations are notoriously associated with tyrants, with autocrats. So efforts to restore democracy can be positive, but that doesn't justify the unilateral exercise of military power to effect that regime change or to implement or enforce a criminal warrant issued by your state. And so it's going to be very interesting if and when the administration has to defend its legal position, although the irony of that whole double tap incident has been a windfall for the administration, because I think it became very clear to them that the Republican majority in Congress was not willing to challenge their assertion of legal authority to conduct these operations, which probably contributed to the decision to go one step further and take this action.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see over the coming days what the reaction in America is to this as they come out of their New Year break. Jeffrey Korn, the director of the Centre for Military Law, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more now on that extraordinary news conference from Donald Trump, where he said that the US will run Venezuela until a safe transition can take place. Let's listen back to some of that address from Mar-a-Lago.
Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones, like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer, all perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, it's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, maybe like never before. These highly trained warriors, operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement, caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in what's called a ready position. But they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated.
This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do. It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. And the word integration does not explain the sheer complexity of such a mission. An extraction so precise, it involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination, all coming together in time and place to layer effects for a single purpose: to get an interdiction force into downtown Caracas while maintaining the element of tactical surprise. Failure of one component of this well-oiled machine would have endangered the entire mission, and failure is never an option for America's joint force. Those in the air over Caracas last night were willing to give their lives for those on the ground and in the helicopters. Let me talk a little bit about the preparation. After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets, in early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel so, as the president said, they could be brought to justice. And as the president said earlier today, weather in Venezuela is always a factor this time of the year. And over the weeks through Christmas and New Year's, the men and women of the United States military sat ready, patiently waiting for the right triggers to be met and the president to order us into action. Last night, the weather broke just enough, clearing a path that only the most skilled aviators in the world could maneuver through. Ocean, mountain, low cloud ceilings. But when tasked with a mission, this organization does not quit. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time last night, the president ordered the United States military to move forward with this mission. He said to us, and we appreciate it, Mr. President, good luck and Godspeed. And those words were transmitted to the entire joint force. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49, and there's simply no match for American military might. As the night began, the helicopters took off with the extraction force, which included law enforcement officers, and began their flight into Venezuela at 100 feet above the water. As they approached Venezuelan shores, the United States began layering different effects provided by Spacecom, Cybercom, and other members of the interagency to create a pathway. Overhead, those forces were protected by aircraft from the United States Marines, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Air National Guard. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones. As the force began to approach Caracas, the Joint Air Component began dismantling and disabling the air defense systems in Venezuela, employing weapons to ensure the safe passage of the helicopters into the target area. The goal of our air component is, was, and always will be to protect the helicopters and the ground force and get them to the target and get them home. As the force crossed the last point of high terrain where they'd been hiding in the clutter, we assessed that we had maintained totally the element of surprise. As the helicopter force ingressed towards the objective at low level, we arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life. After securing the indicted persons, the force began to prep for departure. Helicopters were called in to exfiltrate the extraction force, while fighter aircraft and remotely piloted aircraft provided overhead coverage and suppressive fire. There were multiple self-defense engagements as the force began to withdraw out of Venezuela. The force successfully exfiltrated and returned to their afloat launch bases, and the force was over the water at 3:29 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with indicted persons on board.
We're going to be running it with a group, and we're going to make sure it's run properly. We're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure, which will cost billions of dollars. It'll be paid for by the oil companies directly. They will be reimbursed for what they're doing, but that's going to be paid. And we're going to get the oil flowing the way it should be. As you know, it was just a minor flow. It was actually a minor flow for what they have. But we're going to run it properly, and we're going to make sure the people of Venezuela are taken care of. We're going to make sure the people that were forced out of Venezuela by this thug are also taken care of.
Mr. President, does the U.S. running the country mean that U.S. troops will be on the ground? How will that work?
Well, you know, they always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it, but we're going to make sure that that country is run properly. We're not doing this in vain. This is a very dangerous attack. This is an attack that could have gone very, very badly. Could have gone very badly. We could have lost a lot of people last night. We could have lost a lot of dignity. We could have lost a lot of equipment. The equipment is less important, but we could have lost a lot, and we're going to make sure that this is proper. We're there now. We're ready to go again if we have to. We're going to run the country right. It's going to be run very judiciously, very fairly. It's going to make a lot of money. We're going to give money to the people. We're going to reimburse people that were taken advantage of. We're going to take care of everybody. It's very important. We couldn't let them get away with it. You know, they stole our oil. We built that whole industry there, and they just took it over like we were nothing. And we had a president that decided not to do anything about it. So we did something about it. We're late, but we did something about it. Yeah, please.
President, can you explain the exact mechanism by which you're going to run the country? Are you going to designate a U.S. official to coordinate?
Yes, it's all being done right now. We're designating people. We're talking to people. We're designating various people, and we're going to let you know who those people are.
That would run Venezuela?
Well, it's largely going to be, for a period of time, the people that are standing right behind me. We're going to be running it. We're going to be bringing it back. It's a dead, you know, I talk about a dead country. A year and a half ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're a country doing better than any country anywhere in the world. And it required leadership. Venezuela has a lot of bad people in there, a lot of bad people that shouldn't be leading. We're not going to take a chance that one of those people take over for Maduro. So you can look at, and others, we have fantastic people, including people in the military. So we're going to have a group of people running it until such time as it can be put back on track, make a lot of money for the people, and give people a great way of life, and also reimbursement for people in our country that were forced out of Venezuela.
Rubio would be...
You said earlier today that you weren't going to back Machado to come back and be the opposition leader in your Fox and Friends interview. And then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with the vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship going?
I understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. He's just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
Mr. President, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a couple weeks ago, he said he's got to watch his ass. And today he said he's not concerned about anything happening to him in the aftermath of this operation. So just what your message is about that. Well,
he has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And, yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
Mr. President, did you notify any members of Congress in advance?
Marco, do you want to talk about that? Because you were involved in it.
Sure. We called members of Congress immediately after. This was not the kind of mission that you can do congressional notification on. It was a trigger-based mission in which conditions had to be met night after night. We watched and monitored that for a number of days. So it's just simply not the kind of mission you can call people and say, hey, we may do this at some point in the next 15 days. But it's largely a law enforcement function. Remember, at the end of the day, at its core, this was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice, and the Department of War supported the Department of Justice in that job. Now, there are broader policy implications here, but it's just not the kind of mission that you can pre-notify because it endangers the mission.
Well, let's talk now to Guillermo Zubillaga, who is head of the Venezuela Working Group at the Americas Society, an organisation that is dedicated to education and dialogue on the Americas. Guillermo, what do you make of the disconnect between what President Trump says has happened and the conversations he's had with the new Venezuelan leadership and what Delcy Rodriguez has said publicly to the people of Venezuela in the last hour?
Yeah, Jen, I think that is precisely the question, and all of us who follow Venezuela closely are watching, is that the next steps after this operation. As you know, Venezuela is a big country, big territory, so it needs, you need an authority on the ground in order to execute these plans. And it seemed earlier today that was going to be the VP who was just sworn in as president after the extraction. But now it seems that it may not go as smoothly. So that is, as you said, what we're watching closely to see who will be, because there seems to be no evidence of any troops on the ground from the U.S. So the need for a local partner is very much needed in order to be able to execute these plans that Trump and his team announced earlier.
We spoke to a journalist in Caracas this hour, and they said that there was a real feeling of confusion, people running out to get supplies and to get gas. They weren't quite sure what was happening. What have people who were inside Caracas told you about what they are feeling today?
The same. I mean, definitely it was not the scenarios of chaos that a lot of analysts had predicted, comparing it to other countries. In fact, I understand that the private sector is operating and, of course, under the uncertainty that they were used to it, but they're there operating. And I understand that the roads are open. Of course, people are not willing to make any statements, and the information is scarce. It was already scarce before yesterday and today, but I would say that so far in these early hours it seems to be normal. I haven't heard of any consequential incidents that are taking place. So I would say so far normal, but a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions that I'm sure are going to grow, are going to become even more important to answer in the next day, especially as we get started with the week on Monday.
What do you hope will happen in Venezuela? What would be the ideal situation that you would like to see unfolding in the next few days and weeks?
Well, I think this is a country that needs a lot of resources, Jane, and that means investment. It's a country, as you know, it's in a dire humanitarian situation. So it would be important to get some clarity, perhaps for the multilateral organizations to be able to come in, perhaps for the possible investors who are ready to invest in some of the shovel-ready projects to understand who are the authorities and the legitimacy of those countries. So I'm hoping to get, and I'm sure I'm not alone, to get, a sense of the rules of the game in this, of course, transitional period, but understand who are the authorities and what kind of contracts and laws will govern Venezuela in this transition. I'm sure that it's going to take time, but I think that the longer time passes without clear rules, then the risk of other actors emerging grows higher. And that's something that I think we're wishing, and we hope that that's avoided.
Do you think you will see Venezuelans who have left the country starting to return soon?
I mean, Jane, I think, I don't know if it's tomorrow, but many of the Venezuelans who have left are in quite precarious conditions in neighboring countries. For example, the economy is not doing well in Colombia, in Peru, in Chile, right? And there's growing sentiment that against migration. So I don't think it's going to take too much time for many Venezuelans to go back. At the same time, many Venezuelans, including myself, we've grown used to the uncertainty under these years and things changing rather quickly. So I think there will be some time before people make that decision. I do think that a lot of money will go back as soon as I said, as the rules of the games are clearer. Venezuelans still have a strong connection to their home country, and they're aware of the opportunities. They're aware that there's a lot of ventures and technology and ways in which the country can leapfrog from its current state. So I think that the diaspora will play a big role. I don't know how soon, but I think it would be sooner than we expected, especially as I say that here from New York in a very cold January. Many of my fellow Venezuelans who are here would love to go back to a more tropical weather.
Guillermo Zubillaga, really interesting to talk to you from the Council of the Americas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
Just as we were talking to Guillermo, we got a new statement from Keir Starmer on Venezuela. He says the UK has long supported a transition of power in Venezuela. We regarded Maduro as an illegitimate president, and we shed no tears about the end of his regime. But I reiterate my support for international law this morning, and the UK government will discuss the evolving situation with the US in the days ahead.